Recently, for those of us who study violence, especially gang violence, not just locally, but in other places, we knew that the effects of COVID-19 were not just going to be physical, but mental. We knew that violence would ensue once it was quote unquote safe for people to get back to the street. And we have been seeing school shootings, we have been seeing other acts of violence, not just locally, but in other parts of the country. And it is important for us to be aware of this. At the same time, that it is important to recognize that police officers or more police officers in the schools are not going to solve the problem. Because violence on violence is not the way to go. But preventive care is the way to go. Let's think for a second about, do we brush our teeth and avoid violence against our mouth, right? By extracting that tooth that is decay later on, right? Or we just say, I just don't need this tooth. Therefore, I'm okay with not brushing my teeth. I'm okay with not going to the dentist, so on and so forth. In the same way, violence against women is not just something random that happens. And I'm going to focus a little bit more about women today because we are in Women's History Month. But we also know that violence against women continues to happen. There's a wonderful quote by the one and only Bell Hooks from her book, Ain't I a Woman, from 1981. And it's a very powerful quote that tells us the following. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. I will repeat that for you because it's important. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation. In fact, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. I'll read it together and then begin to process it. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. Again, you can check out this wonderful book, Ain't I a Woman? Bell Hooks, 1981. Dr. Bell Hooks was a philosopher and a wonderful gender studies professor as well. As she taught many other areas. And if you've never read Bell Hooks, parts of it are going to be a little bit strong, and they may appear to be anti-male, but no. She needs to find this way to have a conversation for us to really understand what's going on. And the reality is that in 2023, we continue to see violence from the side of boys and men. And yes, we see female violence against the opposite sex. And I get that. But again, because we're talking about Women's History Month, for today's purposes, we're going to focus on male on female violence, physical, emotional, sexual. And the reality is that in this society of the United States, We have been training males for a long time to one, control and abuse females. And it starts in the household. In some communities, in some households, I should say, the boy doesn't have to cook or clean or do anything. It's left for girls to do laundry and cook and clean and whatever else, clean toilets in the home. That is the beginning of this. We teach our boys that they need to be strong, that they don't need to cry, that they shouldn't cry because that shows some form of weakness, and some other male will come by and take advantage. And that's the type of lies that continuously are promoted in cartoons and films and TV and everywhere. This is often the reason that boys engage into violent acts, as we have seen in our communities, not just against females, but against each other. It's important for us to understand causation. This is not something that just happened, especially with the cases locally where kids are bringing guns and knives to school. This is not just something that happened from one day to the next and we say, oh, I don't know where it came from. This has been happening for centuries. And again, we promote it. As an example of this, in what used to be called the School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia, is where soldiers from all over Latin America and I believe African countries were sent to the School of the Americas in order to train these soldiers so that they would go back to Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, and many other countries and represent the interests of the United States. And where it says psychic self-mutilation, this is where these men were taught to block any type of feeling when they would go back and literally slaughter communities of people that look just like themselves. When I speak of Mexico, it's important to understand that probably only the government of the United States and the government of Mexico has the exact numbers of thousands of soldiers that came over to be trained on this, and who then went and trained thousands of other soldiers on how to do this. And again, this same society teaches boys to defend their honor, or whatever they call it these days. This is why kids go to gangs and use violence against each other when no violence is necessary. It is a sick society that demands this. It's interesting to see individuals within our community of Sonoma County who blame one kid or blame another kid, but we're not willing to see that as a society we are sick. And that the actions of our children by bringing drugs and guns and knives to school is nothing more than a symptom of the sickness that we have. And again, while these acts of violence, whether it is against teachers and other individuals, are taking place at schools, these acts of violence begin at home. Sometimes when dad beats up mom. Some of these boys learn early on that they can beat up their girlfriends. Dating violence, it's another example of the sickness that we have. And there are a lot of resources out there for us to heal from this violence, but we must choose to do so. There are national resources, there are state resources, and here at Sonoma County, we have one of those resources, which is Humanidad Therapy and Education Services. And very soon, they're offering some services now in some of the schools locally, but very soon they'll start another collaboration called the ACE study, how it affects parenting and what can be done to break these patterns. They're going to have an event on May 19th from 4:30 p.m. until 7 p.m. You can call 707-525-1515 to get more information, or you can go to my Facebook page, DACA Sonoma County, or you can go to my Instagram page. We just posted this information a little bit ago, Líderes del Futuro. I posted it on Facebook. I posted it on Instagram. We must take this seriously. Bell Hooks, Ain't I a Woman is a wonderful book. And I will repeat this quote once again so that you can think about this a little bit more. It says, the first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. End quotes. It's not about having more police officers. It's about having honest conversations and receiving the help that we as a society need in order to heal. We need to stop being narcissistic and think that we have a perfect society. And we need to think about the next 7 generations that will come after us.